This is Pop Culture Yearbook. On this show, we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year. We then discuss our memories and dig into those movies, albums, shows, and more. I'm Brad.
I'm Pete.
And I'm Giff.
And live from Minnesota, it's Tuesday night.
Oh, good one, Pete. You were ready for that.
I just thought of it.
Or Monday morning.
It is. Oh, yeah, right. We are recording on a Tuesday night, but if you were going to nail that, you should have said Monday morning.
Right, but we wouldn't be live.
Fine.
That's true. We're on a tape delay, folks.
I think they get how we operate. Yeah.
So we are here tonight to talk about one of the topics that I have wanted to talk about since the day we started this, and it's hard to figure out how to talk about it. Like, It's been on for 40, almost 50 years now. It's 50 years in, 2 years? It's been on our whole life, basically. It is our life, is what this show has been on.
What's crazy is that I remember when it was a 15-year anniversary episode, and that was like a really big deal in and of itself. And how fast that time goes by.
Right.
Now we're at 50.
Yeah, almost.
And then, yep. Well, why don't we start? Gifford, do you have any specific memories of watching Saturday Night Live? I know you didn't have NBC, so you didn't get to watch them a lot.
This show would be the definition of FOMO for me growing up. Because you guys talk about Simpsons and Seinfeld and these other shows, but Brad mentioned that Wonder Years might have been our first water cooler show that we would do in middle school, but this was the big one, particularly in high school, where you guys would come to school and talk about what happened on SNL, and I missed it.
That's right.
So that was probably my biggest memory, because of course I didn't get to see it until I got to college and was watching NBC at college.
And we've been talking forever on the show about you not having NBC, so of course, this would be one of those big ones.
I think I probably watched it maybe once or twice if I was over at either one of your houses on a Saturday evening. But
and I wonder, I'll get to the recording when we were in high school, but you must have watched. I mean, I had tapes and tapes.
I did too.
You must have been there.
Yeah, it wasn't a completely foreign idea, the people that were on the show and things of that nature, but I didn't watch it religiously like you guys did. I didn't have it at my disposal.
So Pete, what about you? Do you remember starting it?
Something that, I actually remember. I seem to remember, Brad, you or another friend who you know, Brad, who is good friends with our family, and Gifford, you know him too, Adam. I'm not going to throw his last name out there, but so we were over. They were over to our place a lot, or we were over there. And Brad, you were there, and I just remember like the first time sitting on a couch in the living room on a farm, just watching. I think it had John Lovitz in it. That was kind of when I first fell in love with it. Probably Dana Carvey too, but there was some of the really. Though that's about the era that I got into it, is probably around 86, 87. And then after that, it was appointment television for me. And I would always, I didn't often stay up late enough to watch it on Saturday nights, but I would tape it and I would watch it the next day and always fast forward through the commercials and everything. But I always remember my mom, she would watch it with me on Sunday mornings, and she could never ever get that they were fake commercials right after the monologue, and so she just like always wanted to fast forward. I'm like, Mom, don't want some colon blow. That's usually the funniest moment in the whole show a lot of times. So
an Adobe car,
Mom, you gotta rewind. So, but yeah, then it was. All the way that and through high school and everything, it was the water cooler conversations, if you want to call it that, as much as you can in high school. That's what we would be talking about. And we would just be quoting it and reciting it and all of that sort of stuff. And then, it was a big deal. I remember when Wayne's World, the movie, came out, and some of the other movies. That was probably, especially in that era, that was the top movie that I was excited for. that was based on an SNL sketch, and I think a lot of other people were too. But
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah, I think that was probably the top one back then. Brad, your thoughts?
Okay, so I've heard people say that your favorite cast is the cast that you like started watching, and I can't agree with that anymore because it will always be mine. So in 85, 86, the show was like bombing again. They had Robert Downey Jr. on there and Anthony Michael Hall, like guys that were kind of big at the time as young people, but they just weren't the right fit, and the show sucked. On that cast was John Lovitz, Dennis Miller, and Nora Dunn. And they were the only three that got brought back the next year. And then and the 86, 87 season started with Madonna, and she did this little like from a chair, introduced it, and basically said the last year was it was just a dream, like it didn't happen. Like they acknowledged it was just a shit season. So they had Lovitz and Dennis Miller and Nora Dunn, but they added Dana Carvey in 86 and Phil Hartman and Kevin Nealon and Jan Hooks and Victoria Jackson. And it was only 8 people in the cast. And you look at the cast now, and for the last 20, there's like 20 people in the cast half the time. So it was 8 people, and they did everything. And then in 89, at some point, they added Mike Myers, and he was like the first new cast member in 3 years. And then they started adding more and more. And when we were in high school, it got really big. But that cast is mine. And you brought up John Lovitz right away, Pete. I love that guy. He did so many funny things. But I remember watching the show in like 86, 87. So the very first episode that this cast ever did, Dana Carvey, brand new. Do you know what the very first sketch she ever did was?
Was it Church Lady?
It was Church Chat.
It was a cold open, wasn't it?
It was his very first one. And in that same first episode, he also did the Chop and Broccoli song, which
yeah.
That goes back to his. So if you ever thought if he was going to be a great fit for the cast, I mean, his first episode is like all timer. But I love Church Chat.
I was just thinking of that Chop and Broccoli one. So I watched that actually. For some reason, like a couple of years ago, my daughter watched that in school. Like the teacher had them watch that sketch. I don't know why it was or whatever, but it was a music teacher, I think, and they were teaching them like music, and he was like making the music at the piano. And so then I watched it, and Phil Hartman makes that sketch 10 times funnier.
He's
Dana
so
Carvey was great, but the way that Phil Hartman delivered that role.
It's Sigourney Weaver too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But anyway, Church Chat just kind of took the whole show by storm. And I looked back at like all the appearances of Church Chat, and that first season, 86, 87, it was on like, I think, was it like 13 times? Like, wow. And I remember watching those as a kid, and it would usually be one of the first things of the night. And so I'm 10 years old, and it's a weeknight, it's a weekend, and we're living on the farm. So it's like, I'm going to be home by then, and I got nowhere to go. And my parents would let me stay up, and they thought Church Chat was funny too. And so like me and my mom and dad would often see that together. I think Hee Haw was on at like 10. And so we'd turn this on afterwards. And I just thought it was great. And then Hans and Franz was one of the sketches that stood out so much when I was a kid. Yeah. And so basically from 10 years old on, I'm watching the show, and I'm sure I went to bed before the late sketches a lot during those first few years, but I would see Church Chat every week. And this show it taught me about politics. It taught me about televangelists. It taught me about Donald Trump and so much more, because Church Chat would bring in all these crazy characters from real life. And as a 10, 11-year-old, I could still totally understand what was funny about it and understand what they were doing. And like my mom and dad could think it was funny too, because, it's obviously more for adults, and it was pretty clean back then. And so I was just so smitten with it right off the bat. One of my earliest memories is that season. I believe it was the night before the Super Bowl. I believe it was the night before, actually it was 88 maybe. I think it was the night before the Broncos Redskins Super Bowl that the Vikings should have been in, that we talked about once.
Yep.
Joe Montana and Walter Payton hosted, and it's got the greatest sketch ever where it's Jan Hooks and Phil Hartman are kind of talking about going to bed together in his apartment. and you hear their thoughts back and forth. And then his roommate, Joe Montana, comes in, and all his thoughts are exactly what he said, and they're just dumb. And that's the famous line, "Oh, you won't bother me. I'll be in my room masturbating."
Right.
And they won't bother me. I'll be masturbating. I mean, and I'm watching that as a 12-year-old thinking this is the funniest shit I've ever seen. And then you brought up, Pete, in 1990, that's when the 15-year anniversary was. And I still remember taping that 15th anniversary special, which was 2 hours long, I'm sure, on a Sunday night. And I watched it like 100 times. And that's where I learned, I knew of Dan Aykroyd and all those guys and a lot of the movies they had done. But that's where I really learned about all the old sketches and how great it was. And I became obsessed with the show and like the history of the show. And then in high school, Wayne's World is like giant, and we're recording it every single Saturday, and we would sit and watch it. I got VHSs full of it. We'd watch it anytime we were bored. We'd just throw and listen to it. One of my favorite sketches in high school, which came out in 91, was the Sinatra Group, which is another just all-time classic. And it was basically the people I remember watching it the most with were you, Pete, and our friend Josh Griebel, and Norgard. Norgard loved the show too, and we would just watch it over and over and over again. And that 15th anniversary special was huge. And so that was in 1990. And so when I first decided to do SNL, I thought so one of the sketches that I just love is the Aerosmith Wayne's World one, but also this Tales of Ribaldry. And they're in the same sketch, or they're in the same episode with Tom Hanks. And Tom Hanks was always like the greatest cast member or the greatest host. And then I also love the Five Timers Club when Tom Hanks was on for the 5th time, which was the next time he did it. Both of those episodes happened to fall in the calendar year of 1990, one in season 15, one in season 16. So I'm like, we're going to watch those 2 episodes, and that's what we're going to talk about. But then as I'm watching them, one of them ended, and guess who hosted the next week? Fred Savage. And we just talked about the Wonder Years. I'm like, well, I got to check this out for Gifford. And there was a couple funny things in there. And then I'm looking through all the different ones, and I see the Patrick Swayze one, and I see Alec Baldwin. And I'm like, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut out a few of the Tom Hanks ones. We're still going to do those, but I'm going to narrow them down. And then we're going to get into just a smattering of sketches from throughout 1990. And so we're going to cover 5 different episodes here, about 3 or 4 sketches at the most per episode. And I think I got it down to what is a really awesome time capsule of this show and this cast. And so that's what we're going to do. And I just love it so much. So
yeah,
that's why I picked it.
And it was a blast watching the things that you assigned us. But as always, you end up watching more than what the assignment is. So, well, instead of just watching 2 skits per episode or 3, you'd end up watching a few extras. So
we're keeping it to 1990, but like I wanted, I'd love to watch the Sinatra Group. I wanted to watch some of those great commercials, like the Change Bank commercial, and the one with Roseanne Barr when she's on, and it's a credit card with Phil Hartman.
Yes.
Those are some of the funniest all-time things.
That is a hell of a,
You got to draw the line somewhere, and so we could have gone on and on and on, but we're going to hit a really good cross section of the show here.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys ready?
I am. What episode are we starting with?
So we're starting on February 17th of 1990. This is season 15, episode 13, and Tom Hanks is the host. And in the cold open, we get our first glimpse right away. Another guy that's been part of our lives for the whole life is Donald Trump. And they've been
for better or for worse
him on the show ever since we were kids.
I was thinking, how good is this in retrospect? This skit?
I know. So this is
horrifying in retrospect is what it is for me. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Trump and his wife, Ivana, and it's right when they're getting divorced because he's been caught with Marla Maples. And so that became a huge thing that we're at the church chat we're going to get to addresses that.
The next week.
And I think Hartman and Hooks, to me, they are the dream team. They are.
Yes.
You put those two together and you cannot go wrong. And they worked off each other so well. And so she plays a great Ivana. He plays a great Trump. And it sounds just like the Trump we know today. So she's upset that he's taken her for too much. And so he's reading through like the agreement that they had made. Yeah. And like the line that stood out to me, she said, "You cheated on me." And he said, "Well, it says right here, I am allowed mistresses as long as they are younger than you." And he's always got an answer. So it sounds like what we know and think of today.
You will take this line down.
Yeah.
And then
take this line down.
And then ask me for more. Some awful line. Yeah, the prenup is, it looks like, an unabridged dictionary, basically.
The
and then and then she keeps submitting to it, and it's like there's nothing that she can do. And then there's the card game, which we were talking about offline.
You take
Find the red queen, if you know what I mean.
She's a red queen.
Oh,
so he offers her
he's
a double or nothing.
Double
find
or
the red
nothing.
queen.
Yep.
And she doesn't find it. And he goes, "Oh, you lose. So sorry." And so she's just left with nothing. And he, of course, gets exactly what he wants. It's a great cold open, and it's a great introduction to, they talked about Trump all the time in the 80s. And so it's a great way to start this.
Well, and it's just a fun, another cast member playing that character, because we've had how many through the years. And
this is all,
this
pre-president.
Yep.
Back when you could laugh at him and it'd be funny for everybody because, nobody cared. It was just, who cares? He's just a rich guy, whatever. All right. So I thought that was a good start.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up in this episode, now we get to this is really kind of where I started with the whole thing. So the Wayne's World, this is actually the 7th time Wayne's World was on already in 1990. And I always think of Wayne's World as being a high school show, but it wasn't. It was on a lot in middle school. Actually, the first time it ever appeared, we were still in 7th grade. Wow. So it goes all the way back. And this is the 7th time already that it's been on here in early 1990. And this is the one that I think propelled Wayne's World from what was a good, obviously it was a good sketch because they'd already gotten on 6 times, but this took it to a new level. So they had Aerosmith on, and you start with Garth and Wayne in the basement, and how they got him is because Tom Hanks is their roadie. And so they agreed if they would let him be on the show, he could bring Aerosmith on. And they're up in the breakfast nook, and they've got the nook cam watching them just eating there. And then the mom comes in and they're all upset. So we start with him talking
a photo album.
They start with him talking to Tom Hanks, whatever his name is, the roadie,
Barry,
and talking about babes, and how he gets babes, but it doesn't sound like it's very good. And they say that. So basically, you're saying roadies are the bottom feeders on the great babe food chain. No. But we have a couple of great lines from here. Take your Ritalin is in there.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about spewing. Hanks is just wonderful because he commits to everything he does on this show. And this is where you still see the goofy Tom Hanks. It just does whatever.
Right.
And he's still doing it today. The Black Jeopardy sketches and David Pumpkins. I mean, who else comes on and does that? He just nails it.
Well, and this is pre Philadelphia.
Right. We all know he can do the most serious roles you could think of.
Right, but
he can also do the silliest.
That was his first real serious role. Before that, I mean, he's doing, Bosom Buddies.
Well, and Big. He's Oscar nominated for Big, and that took a lot of acting chops for that one.
But it was still not like a serious role.
Right.
He's doing Bachelor Party, and he's doing, it's more the lighter side, comedy, Dragnet, and things of that nature. So this fits him perfectly.
He's got to put their scarves on the mics, and he shows them what he does for his job. And what does he say? The famous line.
Test shibboleth.
Check. Sibilance.
Sibilance. Check. Sibilance.
That's a quotable line. So finally, Aerosmith comes down, and they interview him first, and it's great. They ask him if he's had lip implants, and he says no, and he does a lip thing, and I love Garth. Bitchin' lips. But they ask him some questions from the audience, and one of them is about the fall of the Soviet Union recently, and they take it. They give these great, long-winded, serious answers, and I don't know which guy he is, not Steven Tyler, but he responds to Steven Tyler with, "There's never been a blueprint for the dictatorship of the proletariat," and you can see the other guys just kind of chuckling, how great that is.
Yes, it's such a
and that was a bit that they actually brought over to the movie. There was a bit like that in the movie where Alice Cooper is talking seriously about Milwaukee. Yes, Milwaukee, the history of Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
But then they jam out and do the Wayne's World theme song, and it's awesome. And Dana Carvey plays the drums because he's a drummer, and Mike Myers is playing a guitar with them, and it sounds awesome. And it's cool that Aerosmith went on and did that. I mean, they could have said, "We're not going to do that shit."
Right.
But they did, and it's great. So it's hilarious and it's great, and it catapulted that sketch into a whole new. I think that's kind of where the idea of the movie might have even come from.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and it adds so much clout to it that Aerosmith agrees to do it. And they've been in other sketches when they were on, so they seem like they're pretty good sports as far as, willing to do good sketches as well.
Yep.
You guys get any other lines that you wrote down from that sketch, or?
No, I didn't write down the lines from the communism question. They were pretty.
That was what I had.
Yeah.
All right, then it goes right into Tales of Ribaldry, which I think this is one of the funniest sketches. You watch it, the audience isn't laughing that much. I feel like they're like wondering what's going on, but it is. And again, it's the commitment of these people in this that are so great. So this one has John Lovitz, who's got the wig on and the makeup, and he's this English, it's like Masterpiece Theater, but it's about this sex show. And then you got Tom Hanks, who's a bootblack, and you got Victoria Jackson and Jan Hooks.
Yep.
And I just think Lovitz is just delicious in this episode. He is so perfect at it, and the way he introduces it, and he calls him the bootblack. Ooh, the dreary life of a bootblack. It's just, he's so excited about it.
Well, and what's funniest about it too, and maybe I was thinking about that too, and why the audience wasn't laughing as hard. One of the things that made it so funny is that the scene is getting really hot and sexual, and then all of a sudden, boom, they cut away back to John Lovitz.
Yeah,
and like full face in the screen,
or looking through a peephole.
And that probably doesn't cut as well to a live audience. Oh.
Right.
So you've got Victoria Jackson comes in with some boots that need to be buffed to a
She's
fine
the wench.
finish. She's the wench, and he does it, and he starts to kind of, he's not really coming on to her, but that's how it's headed that way. And she says, "Don't come on to me, or my mistress will be mad and give me a harsh tongue scolding." And they cut back, like you said, to Lovitz, and he talks about how great it is, and I just love the way he says, "Indeed." But I think this is when Jan Hooks comes in, and Tom Hanks says there are only two things that get him going: your lips and your ample bosom. And then again they cut it, and Lovitz is like peeping through a peephole because it's all supposed to be so dangerous.
Yeah.
It's not fornication. It's supposed to be like high class, dangerous, and titillating sex.
Well, and one of the great parts is I mean, these women are so, drawn to Tom Hanks in this. That I think adds a little bit too, because he's not necessarily the best looking or buff or whatever guy, but they're just falling all over themselves.
And it's great because Jan Hooks tells him to take his shirt off, and he says, "What?" And she says, "Remove it." And he rips it off, and the audience kind of what? And they kind of clapped, but but then all of a sudden they show him after the cutaway to Lovett's back, and he's got water rolling down his back because he's sweating so much.
Yes,
he's so
that
hot.
is so great that he's just drenched from polishing her boot, and it's just the motion of it is a little bit risk. It's just awesome.
And Lovitz calls it a titillating tightrope. So they got back, and then Victoria Jackson, who's been hiding under a sheet where you can see the whole body basically, but she jumps up and gets mad. And so now we've got this cat fight coming that Lovitz likes, and it's all going to come to a head. But then Hanks just says, forget about it. Let's just have three-way sex. And Lovitz does not like that.
Right.
Because that is not dangerous or fun anymore. That's just simple fornication.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ends the show when that's that, because he's angry.
Well, and he ends the show. This is, of course, according to Fly on the Wall podcast, but he was trying to get this catchphrase going.
The goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Yes, the goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Yeah, I remember them talking about that.
And they just thought it was so funny because Spade had the bye-bye thing with the flight attendant, Yeah. And so Lovitz had tried to get this catchphrase going, and it just really never went anywhere. So I got a little bit of a kick out of hearing it.
It's funny though, because he's so mad, and he's cuts the show off, and it's over. But then he ends with that cheerful goodbye, everybody, goodbye, and it's so the contrast makes it even funnier.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that was one of the sketches that I just thought from the first time I saw it was just utterly hilarious. And it's what makes the show great. It's funny writing. It's like this sketch. It's not about a politician. It's just this out of nowhere, like made up story. And the commitment of these characters is just over the top of this. And it's just wonderful. And so I think it's a classic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So that's the end of that first episode. You might have watched some other, I don't know if you want to mention anything else, but otherwise we'll move on. There was a Mr. Short-Term Memory, but I thought it was one of the worst ones. We're going to get to that later. Oh, the one that I thought we would watch is Hanks and Lovitz are on the cruise, hitting on all the old ladies. And that's they say hello and goodbye.
Hello.
Yeah, because they're total losers and they never pick up anybody. So they go on this. They've done it before. It's a recurring thing.
So usually on a New York street corner, like on a street.
But because they're such losers, they go on a cruise for old ladies, and they think they'll score there, and none of them give them the time of day, and so that's pretty funny too. Okay, so when that ended, Fred Savage was hosting the next one. So I'm like, we just talked about the Wonder Years, and Gifford talked about him, so I better check this one out. And lo and behold, I realized I had no church chats, and the cold open of this episode is a church chat, and it is a really good one.
Yes, it is.
And this is one of the last ones that aired, actually, because like I said, most of the church chats aired like in those first 2 years between like 86 and 88, because it did get to be a little bit, they played it so much. It's like, oh my God, again. So it hadn't been on as much. And so when this one aired, it was, it hadn't been on as many times, and there were only a couple more that took place. But they have to find ways to make it interesting every time. So in this one, it's not just Dana Carvey. Fred Savage is his niece, right? Niece.
Enid.
Yeah. Niece with the same name, Enid, dressed in the same clothes, exact same. It's a caricature of the church lady.
Mannerisms are
14-year-old boy
and
playing him.
How brilliant was Fred Savage?
He was great.
As a 14-year-old boy, he just totally nailed that role.
He did.
So in this one, and again, like I said, Church Lady was one of the bits actually that Carvey did in his stand-ups before the show. Like he created the character, that's so he can do it whenever. And he did it in his audition, and that's one of the things that got him, hired. And then, like I said, it was the very first sketch ever when that cast started. So Marla Maples is their guest, and this is Jan Hooks, as always, looking fine. That woman, I think she is like the perfect, we talked about Crazy Stupid Love and Sexy and Cute. She is the perfect combination of sexy and funny, and she is a brilliant comedian, but she could play these women and just come off so sultry too. And as a kid, I was very drawn to her for that.
And they bring her on, and it's, quote, the first tabloid slut of the 90s, Miss Marla Maples.
When she sits on the couch and she's spreading her legs out all over, and he says, "Oh, you're really bendy, aren't you?"
Yeah.
But I think of Fred Savage here. He was our age, and this guy's on Saturday Night Live playing this character, and he's our age, and we're sitting at home, these dummies in middle school watching this. It's like, this kid, that's really impressive.
Yeah, I was watching this just the other night, of course, and I yelled to Courtney that Fred Savage is on. He's hosting. He's 14. What's Paul done in his first 14 years?
So they grill Marla Maples, and they of course get a lot of the catchphrases in, but then Trump comes in to defend her, and he tries to intimidate them and says, "I can shut down your little dog and pony act," or whatever. I love the way he says or whatever there. But the church lady, she's not intimidated by anybody, so it's the perfect use of. She pauses. Well, isn't that special?
Yep.
It's because he just goes off, and he's this rich and powerful man, and she just shuts him down just like that. And then she says, "We like ourselves, don't we, Donnie?" That's actually Fred Savage that said that, which is another one of their great lines. We like ourselves. So they kind of humiliate him and kick him off, and then church lady and the niece get up and do the superior dance together, and everybody has a great time.
Well, and one of the best parts about church chat is that Carvey talks about writing the sketch and having the censors say, "No, you can't say that.
Oh yeah, right.
You can't say this. You can't say that." So they'd have to find a different way to say the same thing, and it would sound so much dirtier than using the actual term that they wanted to.
It would be funnier too. Yeah.
And it's way funnier that way.
And this ties into, we talked not long ago about comedians and whether they're, swear a lot or not. And the clean ones that, sometimes they're funnier because they have to find ways to say things. And it's not just the cheap, easy thing to say. And that fits this perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
The words like bulbous and naughty parts and throbbing and
drunk,
they're all
pump.
used. They're all used the Trump pump.
No, the drunk pump is what Donnie said. I think it's something he referred to it as a drunk pump.
Oh, but they referred to Marla Maples as the Trump.
Oh, that's
pump.
What it was. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't remember. All I have down on my notes is drunk pump. I just thought that was the best.
So yeah, that's part of the brilliance of this sketch is how they could keep it supposedly totally clean when it's actually naughtier than anything.
Correct.
That you could imagine. Kind of like Seinfeld, we talked about the mango
Brad,
episode.
I can imagine some naughty things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the mango episode or the contest.
Right, and it made it funnier by not coming right out and saying everything.
Exactly.
Okay, so I had to watch the monologue, and it's perfect because the monologue is a takeoff of the Wonder Years, and he starts talking, and all of a sudden this guy's voice comes on. Wow, I'm on Saturday Night Live.
and then he goes through puberty on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the narrator says is, I'm on Saturday Night Live, standing there just a few months before the show was finally canceled. They're making that joke 15 years in, and the show is still on now, almost 35 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody else think, I'm watching this, and I think Fred Savage, it totally reminds me of our friend, Chad Drake. Like, he looks like a 14-year-old Chad Drake, one of our best friends.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I never put that one together.
He's got the hair, and I mean, come on. That's a compliment.
Got the stage presence.
And we do call Chad Hollywood, so he's an actor.
That's right.
Hollywood. Yeah.
All right. So did you have anything else in the monologue? I just thought it was cute that they worked at Wonder Years.
All I could think about was sex.
and my mom is sitting in the audience.
And she smiles and waves.
She waves.
Yeah, the presence that this kid had at 14 is, he's literally standing on a stage by himself in front of millions of people hosting SNL, and he's nailing it. He's absolutely killing it, with this whole voiceover thing, which I honestly think would be a little harder to do, because you got to act like you're talking, but the voiceover is going and you can hear the voice, so I think he did a great job.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to skip ahead now to Weekend Update. And when I was watching this one, I'm like, there's two characters. So I love the little characters that come on to Weekend Update. I still love certain ones. Like, recently they had Cecily Strong had like the girl that you don't want to get stuck talking to at a party. And, you had Stefan, of course, with Bill Hader.
Stefan was amazing.
And there's so many great ones, but these are two back when I was a kid that I just love. So Annoying Man by John Lovitz was on, and it's just the stupidest thing, but I love John Lovitz. I think the guy is just absolutely hilarious.
I like how he's picking at Dennis Miller, like just trying to touch his hair or something. I mean,
so he's got the terrible hair and the glasses, and he's got the ugly, like big paisley shirt on, and they had been to some magic show or something. So he's going to perform some magic tricks, and he's going to make tinfoil disappear, and he puts it in his mouth. And it's just
he just eats it. Like, whoa.
And then the fork on the chalkboard.
He fakes the chalkboard. Like, that's the trick. He doesn't make it make a sound. But then Dennis Miller says, well, that's not really a trick. So then he starts doing it, of course.
Because that's very
and I love one of the great lines in this is that he's talking in this terrible, annoying voice, but then Dennis Miller will yell at him, and he goes, you don't have to yell. And the chemistry between the two, I love Dennis Miller. He was my first, update host, too. And I just thought he was great. And I didn't understand half his jokes because the guy would just
still don't
create. Yeah, no, you still don't. But I still loved him. And I love the line that, speaking of magic, Miller says the best trick is that he's gotten that thing on the show 3 times, talking about Annoying Man. That was a great line. That character was so memorable to me, and so I just loved when he popped up there.
Well, you brought up Dennis Miller. You brought up the point earlier about how you would learn about current events as a kid that age, and Dennis Miller he was the one that rattles it off more than anybody. It's like you that's how you got your news as a kid that age.
Because Church Chat was a bunch of news to me, but Dennis Miller was another way to get your news too.
Because it's like, well, and it's like other night shows like Johnny Carson and whatnot, but that was like right up there because he would always, of course,
Well,
set
yeah,
up
and I
the
didn't
joke
watch.
with a
I
real
like
news story, which they still do today.
you
set it up
watched the
with a real
Tonight
news
Show a lot,
story
I
and then
think. I
finish
never
it with the
really
joke.
watched it, so to
Yeah.
me it was Weekend Update.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm watching this, and Annoying Man's on, and that's great. But then a couple minutes later, and it's not often you get two guests like this in one. Grumpy Old Man comes on, and he might have been my favorite character ever as a kid. He's up there with Stefan. I've never loved anything better than that.
Yeah.
And this was like in the same league in the original one. So he was on, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, and some are a little funnier than others, but this one was a pretty good one. And he's talking about how when they were young, they didn't have different shoe sizes. You only had one kind of shoe, size 7, and you wore it no matter whether it fit or not. And you took it off and you'd have a bloodied stump.
And we liked it.
And he always would say, and we liked it. We loved it. And then he said, we didn't have, was it like parks or something? And he said, if you wanted to go on a ride, you had to go to the top of a mountain and just throw yourself off. And when you were doing
Fling
it,
yourself
like, oh,
off
no,
a mountain.
maybe this wasn't such a good idea, but we liked it. And he would have like 3 things, and he would always bring them all together at the end for the punchline. We were just a bunch of bloodied stumps throwing ourselves off mountains doing this. And it would tie it up perfectly, and it got the huge laugh.
We would pump raw sewage directly into the water supply.
The best one to me ever, and it wasn't in this one, but it was the one where he talked about we didn't have fancy latex condoms. You had to wear a burlap sack, and you couldn't feel nothing. And that's the most memorable one that he ever did, and I love that one. But that wasn't in this one, of course.
What I liked in this one was there was a moment where he's going on his rant, and like Miller is looking at him and just kind of going, "Oh God," and Carvey just gives him this wry look of,
"Oh, he does.
I'm killing this, and I'm just
he's
gonna
so
keep
good.
killing it." It just a half a second look, but it's like I got this audience right where I want them.
You are correct on that's a great observation because he could do that, and these guys were so good at it, and so they knew exactly what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I love Grumpy Old Man. I thought it was so great that they were both on the same one here.
Well, and wasn't there news from 10 feet away on this one too?
Yeah, actually, that was on a couple of these episodes, and that. It's one of those things that's funny, and they played it up. It's funny in concept, but then it drags on too long, and that becomes the whole joke.
That's the whole point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. I mean, Kevin Nealon pulls that kind of stuff off wonderfully.
Correct.
Okay, so now we're going to skip ahead to April 21st, 1990. So that episode, by the way, was the one right after Tom Hanks. It was episode 14 of season 15, February 24th. Now we're going to April 21st, 1990. This is season 15 still. It's episode 18, so just about the end of the season. And this is, I think we decided, the first time Alec Baldwin hosted. I'm pretty sure it's the first time.
Based on his monologue, it sure seemed like it.
And,
because
well,
he wasn't sure
you've
how to
obviously
do,
listened.
Yeah, he wasn't sure how to do the monologue and what to say. Yeah. He didn't know how to do jokes, so all he did was stand there and charm the audience, and that was really funny.
And that's the brilliance of him. He hadn't done much comedy, and he's not really known for that. And you've obviously listened to a lot of the Fly on the Wall podcasts.
Yep.
They talked to him and about him and how the women were just, gushing over him when he first came on this show and how he wasn't comedic. But for a guy like that to become one of the all-time great hosts and just immerse himself in the show, I mean, it's a great story. He's awesome.
Yeah, I think when I think of Alec Baldwin now, I don't think of Hunt for Red October or Malice or Glenn Ross. I think of SNL. He's been on there so many times and had so many great skits that
sweaty balls.
You say, yes, the sweaty balls, and of course, all of his Trump stuff in recent years. But holy cow, I mean, it's this. I look at him the same way, kind of, that you look at like Walken, because Walken was so serious with everything that he did. Well, and then he comes on SNL and he would just knock it out of the park because
they've talked about him
by being serious.
But he didn't even know. He didn't know what he was doing. It's just him that's funny. Like, he'd read it straight off the cue cards, but it would be the most funny shit ever because he didn't know how to be funny or how to act.
It's so far from type.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's great.
Yeah.
All right. So this starts, and I wrote it as optional. I'm guessing maybe you both watched it, but
Yeah.
I had to include a George Bush one. So when I talked about these characters that I loved as a kid and learning about like the news, I mean, when Dana Carvey started doing George Bush, like that's one of the greatest imitations of all time. And it's so over the top, but it is just, you watch him and it's amazing. It is a clinic. It's impossible to imagine how he can get up there and do that and not break or screw up, and how he can take the little things that George Bush did and just accentuate them and just turn it into this amazing thing. And so in this one, you've got, he uses the word prudent, wouldn't be prudent. It's the hand gestures for me though.
Yeah.
It's just, he's all over the place.
1,000 points of light.
They're brilliant, and you can't describe it unless you watch it. He's got the not gonna that.
Yep.
Greenhouse effect. Not gonna die.
I just think it's one of the greatest creations. And then it ends with him talking about how he takes THC and he started quoting Strawberry Fields, and that's pretty funny.
Well, he takes it for his glaucoma, so he's got his drops, and he's dropping
but it's pouring into his mouth.
But it's going right into his mouth.
Catalytic converter, when it's hot, don't touch it.
Don't touch it.
Wouldn't be prudent. I think that it's so funny. And then you got to talk about, he wasn't in these because it came later, but the H. Ross Perot one was just as good. And they did episodes where they were both on the stage at the same time, and they had to film like them separately. And David Spade had to be the stand-in from behind while the other, because Carvey is playing both parts in the same debate, and it's brilliant. The guy is utterly brilliant.
Yes, he is. Yeah, you think about a vehicle for that kind of person. SNL and Dana Carvey were made for each other, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to come up when we do our draft here.
Probably. Yeah, I would think so.
Okay, so in this one, I only picked, outside of the George Bush, I picked one sketch, which is another one that just stands out to me as an absolutely all-time classic. And we just talked about Alec Baldwin being kind of awkward, maybe not doing a lot of comedy. But there is a scene, and it's buried towards the end of the episode. This is one of the last scenes of the night, which usually aren't that funny, or, they're whatever. But he's this mysterious visitor at this diner. And it starts with the waitresses are Jan Hooks and Nora Dunn. And you've got these two just complete doofuses that are like the regulars at the counter, and they're played by Phil Hartman and Kevin Nealon, and they got like buck teeth, and they're in love with Jan Hooks, the waitress, and they're like talking to her and like, oh, you're so cute, you're so funny. And she plays along because she's it's like this Southern cafe, and she's like, it's like Alice. She's this waitress playing along. And Nora Dunn, I don't think she ever leaves. She's like standing in the corner reading a paper or something, and she never even turns her head. But again, the chemistry between Hooks and Nora Dunn, I never thought Nora Dunn herself was that funny to me, but those two together, they are also magic. Like they did the Sweeney Sisters, where they would sing these songs, and there's a Christmas one that's one of the greatest things. But they sit here, and the timing between them two, and it's, it doesn't, I bet if you read it on paper, the sketch isn't very funny. But when you see how they do it, it is utterly amazing. So they're talking about guys and whatever, and then Alec Baldwin comes with this big cowboy hat and these aviator mirrored sunglasses, and he just stands in the door, and he's looking really good. I mean, seriously, that's what you're supposed to think. All the women are like huffing over him, and they say like, here comes trouble. And then he sits down, and my favorite line in the whole sketch is Hooks is already like kind of put off by him because she thinks he's too much, and he says, look at him over there, sitting on that stool like he's doing it a favor.
Right. Yes.
That was the line that I had written.
Yeah.
So she goes over to wait on him, and it's just this nonsense conversation, and they're like fighting with each other, but for no reason, and they're like yelling at each other.
Because they're so attracted to one another.
Yeah.
And they don't want to admit it to either one. They both want.
But I mean, it's elevated before she even like.
Yeah.
It's the second he walks in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "We got rules here, mister." And she asks him what he wants, and she says, "You ready to tell me what you want?" And he says, "I made that decision when I was 12." It's just so stupid. So, and then she's going to walk away. And he grabs her and pulls her back and says, or he orders eggs, and he says, I like my eggs on top of my toast. And she just goes, I bet you do. It's so funny. So she puts the order in, and she's stacking some muffins over on the other side of the counter, and Kevin Nealon goes, you sure do stack those muffins real good. Because the two doofuses are still sitting there.
It's an acquired skill, is what she tells him.
But she can go, and she's just happy-go-lucky and smiling with them, and then she walks over to the other guy, and she immediately turns it on again, where she's like on edge and angry. And she says, what kind of pie does he want? And he says, there's no pie on the menu. And she says, well, you get pie with your meal. And they start fighting. And Gifford, do you want to say this one?
Well, and he says, pie is never free.
All I'm saying. But it's you have to see it. The delivery, he like pauses after all I'm saying. He says pie. And then he goes, it's never free. And it's almost like he's cracking inside. It's amazing. And so finally he gets up and leaves. And for some reason on Peacock, the sketch gets cut off as he's leaving. Like there's a little bit more, but it's just bizarre. Like, where did they come up with this idea? What does this mean? Why am I watching this and why am I laughing at it? And I am crying at how funny it is because of the writing, because of the performances and the commitment. And then when you throw a guy who's not known for comedy, and Alec Baldwin just absolutely nailing it. It's magic. It's so good. I think it's one of the best ones.
And you have the difference between him and the two doofuses at the counter as well. So that adds another layer. Yeah, it's excellent.
Pie is never free. Anything else on Alec Baldwin?
Anyone else with a comment? No, I thought it was great. Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to skip ahead to season 16. So season 16, episode 4 is on October 27th of 1990, and this is hosted by Patrick Swayze. And when I say Patrick Swayze, the first thing you might think of is the Chippendales sketch, which was in this episode, but you can't watch it on Peacock, so I didn't assign it tonight. But let's just start right there. We've all seen it. We all know it's maybe the greatest sketch of all time. What makes it so great?
Well, first off, this is Farley's first season.
Yeah, so Farley is okay. I was going to say, sorry. I was going to say in the Alec Baldwin one, they've added new characters or new cast members. Farley and Chris Rock and Julia Sweeney are all brand new. So this is episode 4 for Chris Farley ever.
Yeah. So it's amazing when you think about that because he completely goes head first into this role as the
kind of like
Chippendales.
Dana Carvey, just immediately, this guy is going to be great.
I mean, you watch this sketch, and if you didn't know, you would guess he was, a couple of years into his run at SNL. But no, he's a new guy on the block, and you've got Swayze, who's coming off of Dirty Dancing and Roadhouse, and he was, he's just the bee's knees sex symbol of the time right now. And then you put him side by side next to Chris Farley.
Ghost is probably just out too.
I think Ghost was out and came out in 1990.
Sexy scenes.
Yep, for sure. So, I mean, he's the epitome of sex on a stick. And then the two of them standing on stage look like the number 10. I mean, he's perfectly svelte and muscular. And then you've got Farley. and Farley is just, obviously his stomach is falling over his belt, I mean, and they're dressed the same and they just go at it. And the judges with Nealon, Hooks, and is it Nora Dunn?
I don't remember. I don't think, maybe. Yeah, it might have been.
But they play it so
Actually,
straight.
No, because I think she left the show after the last season. She might not even been on, so.
Okay. But there was a third judge. They play it completely straight. Like they're watching both of these guys up there doing their dancing.
Well, and to be fair, the dancing is about equal. That's what makes this sketch.
That's what I was just going to say. We've talked on this show before about that Chris Farley is actually pretty athletic. And he was an athlete. He played rugby, I think it was. Or
at Marquette.
Or something. He demonstrates it, and he's able to keep up with them.
Right, but we're not looking for, I mean, let's be honest, Chippendales aren't known for their dancing, much like Hooters isn't known for their wings.
True.
Like, you want to look at something that's appealing while it's shaking around.
Well, and that's
right?
why they don't pick him, but they're so
Yes.
nice about it. But I think, and they've talked about how, they made fun of Farley's weight too much, and they did, I'm sure. And how this sketch, like, I think he feels kind of bad about it afterwards. But I mean, I don't look at it that way, because the brilliance of the sketch is how damn good he is at dancing
Yes.
and selling that, and how impressed you are with this guy. And it's not a joke, because he's not bumbling around and falling over and making fun of big fat guy. He's like legitimately talented. And that's so I wish it had a better, like, legacy for that, because that's how I view it. And it's just
when he throws the shirt between his legs and does the back and forth. I mean, he just kills it, and he's doing like really good like turns and jumps, and I mean, it is an all-time sketch, and it will always be one of my favorites for sure. And I just love how Patrick Swayze is like, the two of them are in this together, even though they're like competing against each other for the final position. They're both cheering each other on.
Yeah, they're so nice to each other.
Swayze is like nervous. He's like intimidated.
Right, because he doesn't know if he's got. That's the other thing that's great. He doesn't know if he's going to win the spot while he's standing next to Chris Farley. So it's so good.
Okay, so we didn't watch it, but obviously, see how well we know it, because it's such a it could be possibly the greatest sketch in history.
Right.
So this one opens though with a cold open, and I don't have many notes, but I thought it was funny, and you guys are both, and your wives are big fans of Dirty Dancing. So it starts with, it's called Dirty Square Dancing. And apparently they've like kicked Patrick Swayze out in the past, and he comes back for one last and says, "Can you call this?" And he says, "I don't know, Johnny." And whatever his name is, he goes,
I think it is Johnny.
Well, no, I think he says, "It's what the people want, Pete."
Yeah, exactly. And that's the same thing from Dirty Dancing. This is what the people want,
So, and then there's lines like, it's do-si-do, and he says, "Grab his ass and let him go. Lift your dress up over your head, lift your leg up to the sky, and run yourself on your partner's thigh. Stick your face in your partner's crotch, lick, don't bite." Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
And how they committed to those ones too. The dance
and it's
moves,
Jan Hooks again.
They were all in.
Yeah. It's pretty short sketch, but it's funny.
And the other thing that makes
short.
it,
I had that written down.
The other thing that makes it is Hartman as the straight man. He's calling this perfectly, like, this is the way it's supposed to be. He's not cracking up. He's not pulling a Jimmy Fallon, laughing through the whole damn sketch.
I think Hartman only ever broke like one time ever when he was on the show.
So I mean, he's calling it just like a regular square dance caller would do it, and it's just outstanding because he legitimizes everything when he does it, and that's what makes it funnier.
All right, so then we got two of just my favorite sketches ever in this episode after this. So the next one is a mousetrap seminar for a bunch of just complete idiots who don't know how to work mousetraps and think that they can take the cheese off the mousetrap. But I love they mention what class it is and say, if you're in the wrong class, get up and leave. And who's the guy that gets up to leave?
That was that O'Brien?
Yeah, Conan O'Brien.
Conan O'Brien, yeah.
Because he's a writer. And then later, a guy pokes his head in the door with the thing on his nose, and who's that?
That's Bob Odenkirk.
Yeah, I mean, it's just awesome. These two guys just peek their heads.
They're writers. They're writers on the show. They're just not,
But at the time, you didn't know who they were. And you look back and it's like, oh my God, that's Bob Odenkirk.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Nealon is the instructor.
Yeah, Kevin Nealon is the instructor, and he can always play a really good straight man in a thing like this as well. And they ask him all these questions like, well, can you just take the cheese? What if you're really hungry for the cheese? Can you smell the cheese? What if it's a hot dog? What if it's a piece of a hot dog? And he just keeps telling him, no, you can't touch the mousetrap.
One of my favorite parts is when the guy says, well, what if it's a rat trap? So they go through the hole if it's bigger than a rat trap. And he goes, any other questions? And Farley puts his hand up. He goes, and you can't do it either if it's smaller than a rat trap. And the way Farley shakes his hand as he's putting it down, it's just so awesome.
But this is kind of like the other one we just talked about, where he's being so patient with these people. These are the dumbest people in the world, and he's answering their questions seriously. He's not getting upset, and so Nealon in his role just does a great job.
Yeah.
And Jan Hooks again says, well, what if you just really wanted that cheese, though? Oh, so then there was a good one. Victoria Jackson asks, well, what if you touch the mousetrap with something first? Which is not bad for these. And he goes, good question. Good question. Did everybody hear that? And they all go, no.
No.
So he asked her to repeat the question, and she goes, what? I can't remember what I asked.
Well, and I like when I don't remember who it was who asked if it was a rat trap. And Kevin Nealon like leans right in. Okay, now what do you mean by that? What
I think it was Mike Myers.
Was it Mike Myers? Yeah. And he goes, well, it's like a mouse trap, but bigger. And he's still with the spring and the catch.
Yep.
Yeah. Then no, you can't take the cheese.
So then it ends, and this is the thing that I've quoted for 40 years here. He shows a film strip about mouse traps, and Dana Carvey gets up and walks up to the film strip and starts grabbing at the screen where the cheese is. and he goes, what are you doing? And Dana Carvey goes, trying to get that cheese. And I've said that like a million times in my life, and some people recognize it, and I love that. And then he has to tell him, no, that's movie cheese. See, that's not real cheese. You can't actually take that cheese. And then he ends the class and sends them off. It's oh my God. It's just like, where do you get this idea? But all these characters do this fantastic job with it. And you got the straight man. It's wonderful.
Well, it's like that's one too that it has to seem really stupid when you see it on paper.
Yeah.
And it's like to make the decision to move forward with it. It's like, this is dumb. It doesn't make sense. Mousetrap seminar. I don't.
But then you see how dumb they look. Like Dana Carvey's hair is all disheveled, and you see the dumb faces they're making. I mean, all this
Chris
stuff.
Farley, like you said.
Yeah, the hand is. Okay, so then I think this was the last sketch of the night, and this is just, to me, one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It ends with white trash bed and breakfast. And there's even a little theme song. And one of the brilliant things about this is, like, almost every cast member is in this. It is just loaded. And so it starts right away with Jan. So they're in like a really rundown, crappy mobile home.
Yep.
And Jan Hooks is out in the kitchen area, and she's yelling right away, and she's yelling. And she tells Mike Myers in his overalls and no shirt to go feed the dog. He's like, oh, no. And it's just, all the screaming is so good. So he goes outside. Swayze's got his shirt kind of tucked in the front because he's running this thing. He's like the one who's trying to make the money. And so he's trying to look.
Proprietor.
Yeah, he's got his shirt buttoned up all the way too. But he's drinking ketchup from a bottle. And as he's doing that, Jan Hooks is pouring a bunch of Coke or something in a bottle for the baby, and she gives it to somebody. Go feed the baby with this pop. Dana Carvey is the straight man this time. He comes out of the bedroom, and he's the guest who slept there. He looks a lot like he's played like George Plimpton sometimes, where he's this very buttoned up, serious guy. But he's great because he's like patient with these people too. Like he's not running out and screaming, and
because he's like a critic for that reviews bed and breakfast, so they're really trying to impress him.
So Victoria Jackson comes in, she's like 9 months pregnant, and she's smoking. Chris Farley comes out too, and so the Jan Hooks, he says something about the smoking, and Jan Hooks goes over and like pats her on the back and says, no, she's a surrogate, all my children work.
Well, I love that you got Schneider and Nealon come in, and they're twins.
Oh,
and they're wearing
they are like the dummy
boxers.
Twins. They're the dumbest yet.
Yeah, and of course them being twins, and Nealon's like a good 18 inches taller.
Well, they come in and look at Carvey right away and go, "Who are you? I bet I could pick you up."
Right.
Did you notice in this sketch how heavily reliant Swayze was on the cue cards?
No,
it's like every time he seemed to me, he was like staring dead at the cue cards all the time.
Well, and and like fly on the wall. That's what they say. Like if you're, really lean on them if you need to, because I mean, who cares?
Well,
get the lines
you're
out.
The host, you're in like every single sketch. Like it's
and you have a week to prepare.
Yeah,
or less than that. You probably have like 3 days.
So this is going off the rails with the pregnant lady smoking and the twins coming in. And now Mike Myers comes back in with the dog that he's supposed to feed. And he's this floppy dead dog. And he throws him right on the table in front of the guest. And he's like, why'd they have to shoot Twinkle? He never bit nothing but bread.
And then he throws him in the sink. Swayze yells
put
at him,
Twinkle on the table. Put him in the sink.
And then they're going to pack Carvey some sandwiches for the road. Do you want onion and ketchup or ketchup?
And he says, I'll have one of each.
I'll have both.
That's a good move.
Yeah, that's a good move.
So their dad has been in prison, and that's Phil Hartman. So to cap it off, he comes back in, and is it Swayze that he's going to fight?
Yep.
And they just go off on each other, and then it freezes at the end. I mean, the writing is hilarious, and the commitment by these guys in this one, it's one that if you haven't seen it or don't remember it, you just can't. We can't do it justice. It's so funny.
There's so many actors in it, and they're just all piled into the screen at the end. I mean, it's
a lot going on. I almost had to watch it twice just to pick up on everything.
Yeah.
But,
there's a lot.
It's a lot to pay attention to.
Okay, we're almost done. Now we're going to go to the other Tom Hanks episode, which is December 8th, 1990, season 16, episode 8. So this is another character that went back years, and I don't know how much he ever did it anymore, but Kevin Nealon, usually he did it on Weekend Update, usually Mr. Subliminal, and he's really memorable. But he actually did the cold open here, and he's talking about the Iraq War, because it's just about to start. This is that timing. And he works in the Iraq War, Saddam Hussein, Milli Vanilli.
Yes.
I think the funniest thing was he's talking about sacrificing Dan Quayle.
Dan Quayle. We have to make a sacrifice Dan Quayle.
Dan Quayle. He works in Marla Maples. And I think, I'm not sure if it's true, but I think maybe every time he does a sketch, he works hot sex in. And this is another one where it's like, you can sit there and read it, but it's so quick. It's just rapid fire, and he never makes a mistake. And it's so impressive. I think it's really funny.
Yeah, he rolls through every single one of them. Yeah, he does a great job. Got to take him at his word, Milli Vanilli.
Yeah, take him at his word, Milli Vanilli. All right, so the reason that I really loved this episode and at least wanted to talk about this is the monologue, and it's the 5th time Tom Hanks hosted, and I remember it vividly when I watched it the night it was on live. And he joins the 5-timers club, and so they bring him out and say that he's got to go into this other room, and he walks in, and he's going to get this new jacket that he gets to wear. And he's met by Paul Simon and my guy, Steve Martin.
Yep.
And he's brilliant again. Yep. So Conan O'Brien's in it again. He's the doorman of the 5-timers club.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And who I think it's Tom Hanks when it's Steve Martin when he puts on the robe and he goes, Tom, old bean, that robe fits you smashingly.
Oh, Mr. Martin.
Oh, no. Call me Mr. Steve Martin.
The one that surprised me was Elliot Gould. I didn't know that he was that big of a.
Well, I think he was way back in the early years. He was in it a lot. But so like us at that age, we barely know who he was. So it's kind of funny. Like, who's this guy?
Yep.
But they make fun of him too. They said he practically lives here.
Well, and they make fun of Lovitz because Lovitz is working as the waiter.
Yeah. So the deal with that is John Lovitz left the show at the end of season 15 to go into movies. And he, it didn't go very well, and he hasn't been doing much. And so he's been coming back to the show for little bits, and what a great sport he is that he'll go back and make fun of himself and play along with it. So he's the waiter now because he quit the show and he has nothing better to do.
Right.
That's his entire bit, though. It almost plays perfectly into who he is. He always plays like a loser, and so plays in well that way.
And they're ordering dinner. Yeah. So all of the menu items are former cast members. I'm assuming all five member or five.
Yeah, I'll have the Chevy Chase and easy on the ham this time.
Right.
What a great line that is. Have the Anthony Michael Hall. It's surprisingly good. I mean, that's so great. The one part I don't get about this is at the end, Ralph Nader tries to get in, and I have no idea what that is and why.
And Madeline Albright.
Oh, I don't even know. Yeah. I
Is
tried to look it up and figure out what the deal was.
Okay.
And I couldn't come up with anything good.
I thought that's who it was.
So it kind of ruins the sketch almost because it's like, what the heck? But everything else up to that point is great. And Steve Martin, of course, is great.
Yeah.
So, all right. The only other one you had to watch, well, there were two small things, is Game Beaters, which I always love a good SNL game show. But this is actually a 2-for-1 because it's a game show, but it is another episode of Tom Hanks is so good as a host that he had recurring characters he played. So Mr. Short-Term Memory is a guest on this game show, and it's like the 3rd time he's done it. And that's pretty rare. So the other Victoria Jackson's the other contestant, which is perfect because she's always plays such a good dummy. And Phil Hartman is the host.
Yeah.
And they're talking about where they're from, and they say San Bernardino. It's like, hey, I'm from San Bernardino. This is a great sketch for Hartman because he just has to be disgusted the whole time, and he can play that disgust just so well. So they get to the end because nothing's going right because he keeps, he forgets everything, and he says what they just said. They get to the final game beaters, and he's like, I have to disqualify myself because somebody already wrote France on my card. This is a network show, isn't it? And of course he wrote it, and it's actually the right answer.
Right.
And so he's upset, but they're still trying to, maybe they can get Victoria Jackson to win. So they ask her what she wrote. I wrote Canada. And the question was, who gave us the Statue of Liberty?
Yes.
And Hartman just goes, oh, great. And she tries to say something and goes, just go. So she leaves, and he's got a shop almost like Wheel of Fortune, and he wants the color TV. But after he says the color TV, he says, oh, wow, color TV. Oh, I'll have the color TV. I really need a color TV. And he just keeps saying the same thing.
I need one of those.
But then Tony Randall comes on for final game beaters, and he's all excited to see him, and he asks him for his autograph. And when he hands it back, he looks at it and goes, what is this? You just hand these out to people you just meet? That's a little sad.
Right.
And so he's totally insulting to Tony Randall.
What I love is in the final game beaters, it's announced that he's playing for $10,000, and his response is, "Oh, great! I could really want a color TV.
I could really use a color TV." Which that's so funny too, because it's 1990. Who doesn't have a like? Why are we talking about color TVs here? And then they play in the thing, and he keeps saying the same clue over and over because he's trying to get Tony Randall to say socks, and he does. And then at the end, he goes, "Oh, nice going. It was socks, Brainiac." And Tony Randall thinks he tricks him to leave, but then he comes back, and so it's a disaster for everybody involved, and that's just Mr. Short-Term Memory. He pisses everybody off. Okay, finally, another little thing I love in the Weekend Update. So actually, in the previous Weekend Update, Tom Hanks one, I was going to mention, you had the Al Franken was on, where he wore the satellite on his head, and which he did throughout the Gulf War, and I always loved that. I thought as a kid that was so funny. It was like a sled with a inflatable pump coming out of it, looking like a satellite. And I just thought that was really funny. I don't know if you watched that or not.
I missed that one.
I didn't watch it, but I remember it.
You remember that
very well.
But this one ends. So Dana Carvey had a bit where he would come on, and because he does a great Dennis Miller impression, of course, he can do anybody. He would come on to Weekend Update, and he would do Weekend Update with Dennis Miller and make fun of him. And he dressed and looked just like him. And I always thought that was funny. And then in this one, he comes on, and then they need 3-part harmony because they're going to sing a song, and they bring in Tom Hanks, and he's also dressed like Dennis Miller, doing a Dennis Miller impression. So you got 3 Dennis Millers there, and they sing Jingle Bells, and they work all his little things in Jingle Bells, bells on bobtail ring, babe, and they work babe in there, and they fight, and they go back and forth, and go, what the hell's a bobtail anyway? And
shaking their heads.
They're shaking their heads, and I just think it's hilarious. I loved it. I think it was a great capper for this little homework bit here.
Well, yeah, I wrote down the part where in a 1-horse open sleigh, babe.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Thank you. But again, Tom Hanks just comes on. He can do the classic Tom Hanks, because that's what he would do that. Like he would shake his head and get all wobbly like that. Like that's kind of his bit. And now he's doing it as Dennis Miller, and it's even funnier.
Yeah. That was good stuff.
All right, I think we're going a little bit longer tonight, but I tried to get through this as quickly as possible. So I hope somebody will go out and get Peacock and watch a couple of those.
I did.
Sketches. It's worth it. All right, we're going to close this off with a cast member draft.
Okay.
And so there are many to choose from here. It'll be interesting to see which eras and who you go with and how this all shakes out. So I'm going to go first, followed by Giff, and then Pete. And if you've been paying attention, this is my favorite cast of all time. And the guy that, I just think he is an absolute comic genius is Dana Carvey. So I was wondering if I didn't pick him, if he'd possibly land to me in second round, but I'm not going to risk it.
No, you can't. You can't risk that.
He's the best, so I'm picking Dana Carvey number 1.
Excellent. I am gonna go with the aforementioned Chris Farley.
Oh, really?
I think he did so many great sketches. We talk about the Chippendales skit, but the Matt Foley stuff was unbelievable as well. And his Chris Farley show. I mean, he just had so much great stuff and absolutely went for it every time.
Yep. Oh yeah.
All right. I will gladly take Phil Hartman.
Oh, that was my number 2.
That's a great one.
Phil Hartman is the glue.
Yeah, he is.
And
he's the perfect straight man.
Since you picked Phil Hartman, I'm going to pick his more contemporary, I think, twin, and that is Bill Hader. I think Bill Hader was, again, one of the most brilliant impressionists, but he did so many other, like Stefan. Just the first time or two Stefan was on, I don't even think I recognized and knew it was Bill Hader. It was so out there for him and so weird. That guy is an absolute genius, and I feel like him and Hartman are like separated at birth in what they could do on this show. They're the MVPs of 2 different eras.
Well, we talk about how great Carvey is and how he was, everything for this cast. I'm going to pick a guy who absolutely carried the show while he was on, and that is Eddie Murphy.
Oh, yeah. See, I didn't put a lot of the people before this cast on because I didn't watch them, when they were on. But yeah, Eddie Murphy's on my list here anyway.
Well, he's got plenty of
clips. You're getting hot. In the hot tub.
But we remember me.
But we, Mr. Robinson.
Well, and that's where that 15th anniversary special was so great because it had so many of those great Eddie Murphy sketches that I probably saw for the first time that night.
Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood.
Yep.
I'm going to go with Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell.
Solid
guy that's always going to go for it.
Yep.
All right. Well, I am going to turn in now and pick a woman because there have been so many brilliant women on this show. And I have 2 ranked really, really highly. So I don't know which one you're mad about, Gift, but I'm taking Jan Hooks because, I mean, that woman,
I love
you didn't watch it back then. That woman she's amazing. Everything she did was amazing.
Sure.
And she carried the thing is, at that time, there weren't a lot of women on the show and they weren't given a lot of time on the show, but she made them put her on there. Like now there's, in the last 20 years, there's been tons and tons of great women on that show.
You would argue women are better than
the women are the show a lot of times right now. Yeah. But back then, I think she had to like break through.
You basically had, I think, 3 women in the cast. You had Victoria Jackson and you had Nora Dunn, and they were completely 3 different people, and so they could intermix with their characters, but they were not overlapping at all.
Sure.
Is it my turn?
It is.
No.
Since we're picking,
I'm up.
Oh wait,
no.
It's Gift.
All right.
That's right.
So
sorry.
I'm going to take another woman off the board here.
This is
I'm going to go
with one, then.
I'm going to go with Kate McKinnon.
Oh no.
Her Miss Rafferty with the alien abductions.
Yes.
If you haven't seen each and every single one of those, please do so. I think it's one of the best stuff that's come out of SNL in the last, however many.
She could do anything too. She was amazing.
Yeah. So
I mean, she could play women and men too, like, and just totally be that role. I mean, she could do anything.
Yeah. So I'm going with Kate McKinnon.
Another woman that's extremely talented and can do almost anything. A more contemporary Jan Hooks, I would argue.
Probably my second.
I'm going with Kristen Wiig.
Yeah,
there she is.
I was maybe going to take her here, but you got her.
Yep. Great pick there.
Kristen Wiig makes me laugh. I mean, no matter what.
Right. Yeah, she kills it.
All right, so where are we at here? Okay, so I'm going to go next to I mean, and again, it's my cast, so and I just think this guy's hilarious, and he was made for this show because he didn't do much outside of this show. I got to take John Lovitz. When he did the devil, he was on the People's Court once playing the devil, and that is another one of the greatest sketches that I've ever
No,
seen.
it wasn't the devil. It was Mr. Mephistopheles.
Mr.
Right?
Mephistopheles. Yeah, you are right. Or the liar guy he created. I mean, he was great.
That's the ticket.
I'm probably going to lose the poll with that one, but I don't care.
There's not going to be a bad list.
No, there's not.
I mean, they're all heavy hitters. Come on.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of which way you want to go. Oh, this is a tough one now. I'm caught between a few here. I think I'm gonna go Aykroyd. I mean, nobody sold a bag of glass better than Dan
bag of
Aykroyd.
sulfuric acid. No, he is
bag of broken glass. Look, prisms.
He's one of the old guys I included on my list because, and I did, I saw so many of his sketches on that 15-year thing, and
he
carried
original.
that show.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I mean, he really was. I mean, Chevy Chase got all the pub that first year, but Aykroyd for that whole first 5 years was just
Aykroyd was the workhorse.
Maybe Absolutely. He was the original Phil Hartman. I mean, he would.
Yep. Jane, you ignorant slut.
I'm going to take a guy, Brad, that's a very key role in one of your favorite movies of all time, as is all of ours that we've done on this show. I'm taking Tim Meadows.
So you're referring to Walk Hard.
That's correct. I am referring to Walk Hard.
Yes, and that's a good under the radar, as the kids would say, low key, because the guy was on for like 10 years and went through a couple casts. Brad. I mean, he was on all the way, I think 91, I think he joined. So he was with most of this cast when we were in high school, and he was still on to like 2000, like doing the ladies' man and stuff with Will Ferrell then.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I will finish mine off with a similar guy to that who was on for a long time. And he is a brilliantly funny guy and kind of under the radar, though. He was never like the main guy. Fred Armisen. That guy, he is hilarious. He could even play Prince. Him standing in the corner being Prince and saying nothing. That's hilarious.
Oh, my goodness.
Right. So, Pete, your pick of Hartman, that was a great pick, and he was very, very high on my list. So, because I couldn't get Hartman as my straight man, I'm going to take Daryl Hammond as my straight man. His Sean Connery is, in the greatest characters.
For that character alone, you pretty much can include him.
And his Clinton and, just any, again, a glue guy that
he was on for like 10 years too.
Forever, So I'm going to go with Hammond on that.
All right.
Shoot, I wrote it in the wrong one.
All right, Pete.
There's so many different directions I could go here. There's about 8 here that are equally deserving, but I'm just going to go with David Spade.
Uh-huh.
All right.
It's amazing the cast members that are left.
So here we go. So my my highest rated one I have here that didn't get picked. I mean, it's Wayne. Mike Myers, we didn't pick.
He didn't get picked. Crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't pick him because he did a lot of great characters I love, but he did some I didn't like very much either. So he just wasn't as consistent. And he always seemed almost like an outcast. Like he kind of did his own thing. But he had some of the greatest things ever. I got Bill Murray. That was my other old guy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Julia Sweeney for Another Woman. Talk about she's kind of sad because she was on that cast when we were in high school. And so you guys might not know or remember. So when like Sandler and Farley and they all came in for the first year or two, like Harvey was still on, it was really funny. But like when we were seniors in high school, that show sucked. It was so male dominated and they did so many of the same things over and over again. And Julia Sweeney was one of the best people on it. And they just totally like shoved her off to the side. And like, she did one of the fly on the walls and it was really good conversation. But there were no women. There were like 17 cast members. And there were like 2 women, and it was all about Adam Sandler doing his bits and Farley falling into stuff. But she was great. She did so many great things. Kevin Nealon.
Yep.
Andy Samberg, Dave, he's on my list. I thought about picking him. I love Bobby Moynihan, drunk uncle, amongst many other things. That guy made me laugh every time. Here's one that any of us could have picked: Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah.
Yep.
I got several more women here. Cecily Strong was for like a decade. I thought you picked Kate McKinnon. I actually preferred Cecily Strong, but they both were great. They like came in together.
Oh, rock solid.
Maya Rudolph. She could have got picked. Chris Parnell is an under the radar one who was just hilarious on the show. Two more, Molly Shannon. And then currently there's a woman I think is just so funny, Sarah Sherman. She's like, to me, the highlight of the show right now when she's on. I think she is just brilliantly funny. That's my list.
We haven't even talked about Adam Sandler.
Right. Well, I brought him up.
Oh, you did? Oh,
I mean, I didn't. He wasn't. I brought him up, but
yeah,
Andy Sandberg.
I said him.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Maybe I was.
No, I heard Sandberg and not Sandler.
Other ones. Well, Dennis Miller, of course.
Yep.
Well, and I didn't put like people that strictly pretty much did the Weekend Update, because I will say too, the best part of the show right now is Colin Jost and Michael Che. They are. That's some weeks. That's the only reason to watch the show. And they never fail. They are great. It's going to be hard for that show to go on when they decide to quit, because it could really.
I got Norm Macdonald too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the only one?
Yep. I think I'm good now.
I have to mention, guys that were on just for a season. Chevy Chase, he had so many good ones. One with him and Richard Pryor, where they were doing the what do you call that? Where you
word association.
Word association was
but
amazing.
Weekend Update and Gerald Ford. I mean,
Billy Crystal was on, and he's great in everything. Currently, Kenan Thompson, I think he just gets into a sketch and you can tell he is so comfortable because he's been there since he was 8 years old. So he just can do whatever he wants. Jane Curtin was amazing. Poehler and Faye were great as well. And one that I really enjoyed was Sherry O'Terry.
Yes.
Her sketch when she would be the woman up on her porch yelling at the neighborhood kids. I mean, just that. I love that. I mean, she was doing, the cheerleader with Farrell. But those sketches when she was on,
I feel like she was kind of the female version of Chris Farley, where she would just go anywhere.
Yeah,
and that was her thing.
Well,
you mentioned Billy Crystal.
Shannon
Billy Crystal. Martin Short too was on there for Ed Grimley, and
Harry Shearer.
Harry Shearer. The great sketch of the synchronized swimmers.
Yes,
a lot of those. The Christopher Guest and those guys.
That
was the season before Anthony Michael Hall.
Okay.
And then it got bad, and then these guys came in and saved the show.
Right. So a lot of great ones that didn't get picked. That just shows not only how long the show is run, but how great the people that they've had on there are.
Totally agree.
Great.
Hey Gifford.
Yeah.
Who's the musical guest for tonight?
Tonight, our musical guest is Preacher Rose. So stick around.
Don Pardo voice.
We'll be right back. No, we'll be right back.
Preacher Rose.
We're gonna go right into it.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that you is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. Next time, tell me on my plan. I turn it up to you. I'm scared, but there's nothing I can do. Aim high if you want to.